Welcome back. Now we take a look at a broader picture here, America's role in the world. Listen, we know what our role has been for the entire 20th century here and now into the beginning of this. Are we supposed to be the world's police force, or should it take a backseat in some fights? Now, critics have said the more the U.S. backs off, the more countries like China and Russia certainly fill that vacuum, that same vacuum that Mike talks about. But the other Mike, there's a consequence to that. I mean, look what happens with Eastern Europe, with Ukraine, and then what if they go further, okay? We look what happens, what if they decide to fill the void in Syria? Where does that go from there? The appetite from the American public, especially after Iraq, and even going back further, what we saw with Vietnam, I certainly don't have to educate you. Andrew's right. I think it's month to month how they feel about certain things, but I know the worry, or I feel the worry, that if we let other people decide for us, that we're just going to hunker down on our borders. And as much as it might seem myopic, if you don't deal with them there, we'll deal with them here. Where is that line? First of all, what are we capable really of doing with the size of a military force right now? And then the willingness and the capability to really do it in the 21st century.
That's a great question, because actually the readiness is down across the forces because the lack of the budget and some of the equipment. Now, so much of the military budget does go through equipment makers and doesn't even go to the soldiers. We still have 11 aircraft carriers. We can still project a tremendous amount of might. So there's no question about that. But what's the military's role? It's to close with, destroy the enemy, take land, all those kinds of things. It's a hammer, but some of the problems we have right now are not hammer-type problems. They're wire cutters. They're other kinds of situations. So the military can be used to project power. And so I think that's an important element that has to be there. But this comes back to our allies, and I'll turn it back over to the professor here, because we've got to say what we mean and mean what we say and support our allies, because that, I think, is the issue right now. Our allies are relying on us to do certain things in the world, and we're just not doing them. And I think that has a greater impact. If we can't be trusted to do what we say, regardless from a military or political perspective, then it's just going to be very weak going forward.
And I always thought that potentially ISIS could be a galvanizing force. They got no allies, right? So you would think, look what happened with the Soviet jet that was shot down. Look what happened to the French. Look, I mean, I can go up and down the line here. Certainly, the Americans don't have to be reminded of them. They are an enemy without allies. So is there a potential that Mike's right, that yes, we have to take the point on this, but there is an ability to bring others on board? Or as the cynical side to say, let the U.S. do it. They do it all the time. Once bitten, twice shy. We saw what happened with Iraq. I'm not doing it again.
I think our only option at this point is to look for allies. And if we don't find those allies, the United States simply is not going to go in unilaterally. What would that solve? If the United States wanders in there unilaterally, we're left in the same position we were post-Iraq. We're not, and this is
okay, but let me give you a hypothetical. Let me get a hypothetical.
Okay.
It doesn't stay just in Syria. All of a sudden, it bleeds over to Israel. Okay, and now it's not just somebody lobbing a bomb over, the northern border or whatever else. Now all of a sudden it's something more serious. Does anyone at this table really think we're going to stand down and let Israel basically fight the whole Middle East solo without helping?
But can I just say, this is where I think President Obama really missed an opportunity. You need to educate the American public on the reality of the situation. Why is ISIS grown to the extent it has? Because they filled, as Mike mentioned, a vacuum of instability, and whether we like to admit it or not, they are the only ones committing violence over there, where it was coming from all sides before. There is a modicum of stability there now with ISIS in charge. We don't want to admit that. So we go in unilaterally, we take them out. We have the military power to do that. We could do that. And what happens next? Are we going to commit 20,000, 30,000, 100,000 troops there indefinitely? We didn't do such a hot job last time. So you have to educate the people, and I think we need to be talking about more than just military. I think that we need to be talking about what the U.S. can do economically to make and politically to make these regions more stable and give people the kind of life that they need. And I agree with the president that those are long-term solutions. My problem with his speech was he didn't do any amount of educating. He has to educate the American public on the reality of the situation.
And they're not without allies. We talk about this. They're an organization. They're not a state, right? They're not a nation. So they're drawing supporters from the radical prism of other countries, and they're migrating there to participate. So yes, they're without state allies, but they're a stateless organization that's sort of drawing support from the rest of the world, from people who are disenfranchised and marginalized and feel oppressed in countries throughout the region.
Big picture though, my generation is the first generation, I think, that doesn't share my fathers, my grandfathers before them, and whatever, which was our role in the world. Okay, when the Nazis, and we can certainly go through the detail of it, but the macro was, we went into Europe. All right, we made the thing right, and instead of basically doing what every other basic invader had done in the past, who were planting our flags everywhere, we did a thing called the Marshall Plan, and we have done those things. One, two, I mean, let's forget about Vietnam. Okay, but my point is, that's who we were and that's who we define ourselves, to great benefit for the United States, not just morally here, but also economically. The idea that we're going to say, we're going to seal ourselves our borders because the world's a messy and ugly place and we don't want to have a fight in it because I don't know how this fight's going to end. I get it, and I think everything they said is 100% right. But there is a consequence attached to that I don't think everybody wants to acknowledge.
Let's not forget, we didn't go into World War II right away.
Exactly, and I said I tried to do the Reader's Digest of it, you know. But
I mean, let's be honest.
And I would point out 20 million Soviets were killed.
Were
So the
killed,
war in Europe was a Soviet-German war. So.
The new normal, though, in the world is this failed nation state, the failed third world nation state that terrorists are allowed to find freedom and grow their opportunities with. Go back 20 years, the Taliban inside of Afghanistan. We're seeing the same repeat right now of ISIS inside of Raqqa, inside of Syria, of disenfranchised Sunnis. The next place, as a military person, is Libya. It's coming. And it's Africa. It's coming. It's just a matter of time. I would be shifting resources towards there right now because if we destroy ISIS inside of Syria, the next place, the next battleground is clearly North Africa.
I knew we could solve the debate, but I'm glad we started it. Mike, thank you so much. I appreciate it. All right, the rest of these guys are going to stay with me because we have major developments as we move much closer to home here and talk a little political corruption. No shortage of that. This, the trial for former Senate Majority Leader Dean Skelos. Dominic Carter live in Lower Manhattan with it all. We'll join DC after this.